What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Canadian Football Fanatics YouTube channel. And thank you guys for tuning in to another video. Welcome back to a mock draft 2.0 Canadian Football Fanatics times 13th man football here with my main man Shane. Gonna be doing another mock draft coming at you guys a week out from the real deal, the CFL draft taking place next Tuesday. By the time this is uploaded, a week to the day. Looking forward to it. The excitement is building. I'm sure I'm talking for Shane as well. Both looking forward to next week, seeing where some of our favorite prospects are going to go, where maybe some of the kind of sleeper picks are going to go as well, and some of course, the most anticipated picks, some of the quarterbacks, stuff like that, where they're going to fall in the draft as well. But Shane, thanks for joining me tonight, buddy. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. I'm excited. Draft season's upon us. We have the NFL draft this coming weekend. We were talking about it before. Seeing where some of those Canadian talents might land Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. And then obviously the CFL draft happening on Tuesday night. I can't wait because that just means football's around the corner.
Yes, football indeed is around the corner, buddy, which is really exciting. Um, and which brings us here tonight. Shane and I are going to do a 3-round mock draft once again here on the channel. Actually, I guess first off, Shane and I did a 2-round mock draft to start, and then we did our creators one that was 3 rounds, and this was going to be another 3-rounder. Shane and I are going to take place, so 28 picks total. And Shane is actually going to be picking for on behalf of the Eastern Division here tonight, and I will be picking on behalf of the West Division tonight. So, interested. Shane was kind of alluding to it a little bit before we hit record of how much things are going to change compared to the 2 previous mock drafts we already have done. But this is, I think, the cool part of mock drafts, of seeing maybe the different possibilities of what could happen. Maybe we think a prospect maybe goes, in the top 3, and maybe he falls because of whatever reason, and different opinions that goes on within a draft. So looking forward to it. Shane, before we get going and put myself on the clock to represent
Yeah.
the Calgary Stampeders, any last words, buddy? You looking forward to it? Anything that maybe you are specifically looking forward to watching in the draft next week?
Yeah, I mean, I think the receivers in the CFL. You have Alec, who is expected to be a day 2 kind of day second or third round pick. Probably won't really see any CFL time, so he'll probably be, if anything, a later pick. But you got Keelan White and Ethan Jordan kind of on the board. You have Alfred, who's kind of in that same spot that Aju was in last year. So I'm interested to see in that regard. This draft is very light on offensive linemen, very defensive lineman heavy this year. So we'll see. I think there's a lot of directions teams can go. Teams can look for I think there's a lot of futures, right? I think like this draft specifically is like, I'm looking for what I can get in 2-3 years. I don't think there's a lot of game 1 or week 1 starters or week 1 impact players in this draft class right now. But I'm looking at 2026, 2027, who can be a positive impact offensively, defensively, special teams in those seasons versus just this year, especially in the first 3 rounds.
For sure. Before we get going, Shane, this might be a little bit of hopefully we don't get too far off track here, but I did put out, by the time I guess people are listening to this, yesterday, my kind of top 10 prospects going into the CFL draft, and I did have the 2 quarterbacks up top, and I think it's a weird thing in drafts in general, but in the CFL draft specifically, when a lot of times defensive backs that can play safety, linebackers that can play kind of special teams, offensive linemen, they have a high positional value compared to other positions that are drafted in the CFL. And I think it's been very unique this year that we have 2 quarterbacks that are by far and away the 2 best players that are qualified to be drafted. But because of maybe their interest in the NFL, it's going to be kind of weird to see kind of where they fall when teams want to pull a trigger on them. Like you said, maybe this draft is there's not as many blue chip talents, but it's about maybe 2 or 3 years from now, which kind of those guys land in that category because they're going to, I would imagine, exhaust all opportunities in the NFL. But how do you kind of see that, Shane, and balancing that? If maybe it obviously isn't going to happen, but if Calgary was to go off the board and say they were to draft a quarterback, because in reality, that is the best player that is available for them to draft at number one. It's not going to happen, like I mentioned. But what do you think of that kind of conversation, Shane, and just how much of a unique one that is with the two very talented quarterbacks this year?
I think in Calgary's perspective, it's 100% a conversation that they should be having in the locker room. And this isn't, or not in the locker room, in the management room and with the coaches and management. Like, no slight to VA. I love VA. I've been a big fan of him. I was hugely excited for him coming up north after his days in Oregon. Um, but he's what, 33 now, and you can say age is just a number, but there's a shelf life on quarterbacks, and they don't have any young quarterbacks on their roster. And quarterbacks in this league take 3, maybe 4 years to develop. You're going after Curtis Rourke or going after El Gersma, like, you have to feel confident that they're going to be up north in the next 2-3 years. Like, you were going to have that conversation with them, being like, hey, if I'm drafting you first overall, there's already a commitment that, like, hey, I'm going to let you go exercise those options, but you're going to be here in 2026 or 2027 at the latest. Like, there's already that kind of, there should already be that agreement in place. But I mean, hey, if they're, if Work is a day 3 pick and now Grisman's a UDFA, I'm 100% calling up their camp if I'm Calgary and saying, hey, if we were to draft you first overall, and can we get a commitment that you would be up for 2026 or by the latest 2027 if you aren't stuck on a team? And if the answer is yes, I think you take him at number 1 personally.
Yeah, no, I really agree with everything you're saying, dude, because I think we both agree that they are the two best prospects in this year's draft, far and away. That's no slight at any of the other prospects that are available, but just these two talented players. We've seen it with Nathan Rourke and Trey Ford with the kind of attention that they grab within fan bases and how they can, respark fan bases and stuff like that. So just being able to have a Canadian quarterback, what that does for the ratio and stuff like that as well, could really change a franchise. So I think it's an interesting conversation. But Shane, before we get too far off topic, let's put myself on the clock. The Calgary
Yeah, let's
Stampeders
go.
are now able to pick. And with that, should I take a quarterback, Shane? No, I'm just
Hey
kidding.
man, do what you think is best. I already know where I'm going with my next 2 picks.
I'm very curious. I have an idea. I think of where you're gonna go. The cool thing about this, Shane, is that not that it's necessarily a competition or anything, but like us picking, kind of knowing that you have 2 picks before I'm gonna be back on the clock with Saskatchewan. It's an interesting kind of who's going to be available, who you're going to take. I know in previous drafts who you've taken with some of your picks, and that's why I'm curious to see who you go again with your number 3. But that being said, Shane, I won't ramble on too long. I'm going to take linebacker Connor Shea out of the University of Wyoming Cowboys at number 1 for the Calgary Stampeders.
Oh my god, I did not see that happening.
I thought you wouldn't, and I kind of wanted to throw a little bit of a different curveball to see how the board would kind of fall, um, going forward from here. The difference, or the two different positions I kind of weighed, didn't really kind of want to think about receiver, honestly. I just think with um, this year, kind of, if you go with a Keelan White, I don't see him being, as you said about kind of some of the prospects, day one help. I think kind of who they have on the roster already, the additions that they've brought in with free agency, I think they're kind of set at receiver. So I think going with a linebacker, in Connor Shea, who I think is a very good prospect, as we talked about in the other, I believe the creators mock draft, Shane, is there's not really a consensus number 1 overall pick. There's kind of a consensus top 3 kind of prospects, maybe top 4 prospects, with Shea and the Queens. I don't know why I'm blanking on his name. Darian
Newell?
Newell and Keelan White. And from the few mock drafts that have been out there, it's a lot of Keelan White. So I wanted to kind of switch things up. I kind of like the fit with. I'm curious if you're gonna go with Darian Newell to Hamilton at number 2 personally, or if he's gonna fall to maybe a number 4. But I'm gonna go with Connor Shea, linebacker. I like the fit there. Fraser Sopik, I think, is a solid player at will. Obviously, they lost Cameron Judge with the trade going to Toronto. Fraser Sopik, I think, is kind of a nice player, but I don't think he's a player that stops you from trying to get better at that position. If he was to play the will, he can play a little bit of Mike as well, and then he is a very good special teams player as well. So I'm going to go with Connor Shea, linebacker out of University of Wyoming, and I will flip it over to Shane for his next two picks.
Yeah, so right now I got Hamilton on the clock. And I think this one is kind of cemented that at number two, I think a lot of people have him kind of two or three, depending on who you ask. But I'm taking Darian Newell out of Queens for Hamilton. He fits a need right now. If you're talking about, a week one starter, Connor Shea's right up there. I don't think he will be a week one starter in Calgary, but he has that potential. But I think Newell, if there's anyone you could give that title to in this draft class, it's him, in my opinion. He's a force inside. I really like what he can bring to a team. Hamilton doesn't have that great of Canadian depth on that defensive line, so I'm taking Darian Newell out of Queens, going to Hamilton at number two.
I like that. I like that. So we have Connor Shea, we have Darian Newell off the board, with Shane coming up with Ottawa, and this has been a
So
steady
this
pick for
one,
Shane. So I'm curious to see where Shane's going
I'm
here.
putting I for this. So for the last two mock drafts, if you guys haven't paid attention to either of those two, I've gone Ethan Jordan, receiver out of Laurier. I am going to put my GM hat on as if I am Sean Burke and pick a player who I think won't be there at 12. There's a very high chance, especially that you picked, Keelan White not going first. Ethan Jordan's kind of that second, third receiver, depending on who you ask. There's a high probability that he will be available at 12. I'm going to take that risk. I am going to North Texas, and I'm going to go for a linebacker. I'm going Jalen Smith out of North Texas to fill that linebacker need. Even though receiver is a big need, linebacker depth, especially Canadian linebacker depth, is a huge need. He's fast. He's tenacious. He's going to be a special teamer. Will be a depth guy. Could easily be a starter in 2-3 years. I really like him. A lot of, again, he's a guy that can go as high as number 3. Could even go number 2 to Hamilton, depending on where Connor Shea goes. If he goes number 1, I think Connor Shea is the number 1 linebacker on the board. And I was going to go with him if Ottawa. If you went Keelan White, he was number 1. But I think linebacker to taking Smith out of North Texas to Ottawa, it just makes too much sense for what they need and how the board might fall in order.
I'm glad you let us into your head a little bit there, Shane. I was curious, judging by your reaction, obviously that you did want Shea to fall to number 3 for Ottawa, but I like that pick, Jalen. Sorry, you went with Jalen Smith, the linebacker in North Texas,
Yeah, and I
at
mean
number 3.
in our creator one, Duffy picked him at 5 going to Montreal. So and I think John Hodge, I believe, had him in the top. Yeah, he had him at number.
Pretty
He had him,
high
I
as
think, in
well,
the
I
top
think.
10. Oh no, he dropped. He was a second round. He was the second linebacker taken. He went to Montreal at 14, but I believe there was also another one that had him going
I believe
4, and that's the
maybe
Marshall
his first
Ferguson.
mock draft. Oh, that one, yeah.
Yeah, Marshall Ferguson had him going 4. I really like him. I watched tape on him. I think he brings some flexibility to that linebacking core. So
Okay, so that would mean that I am
we
back on
got
the
the Rough
clock
Riders on the clock.
with
Make Coach proud.
Saskatchewan. I think this would make Coach proud. Um, so this is an interesting one with Saskatchewan, who I think on paper, right, and obviously on paper is a little bit different than the real deal when games are being played. Saskatchewan most definitely has the best roster on paper in the West, and you could probably even argue in the CFL. So I think with this pick, not necessarily somebody that they need right away. Obviously, you'd love for that to happen, but I think I'm going to go with a player that's been talked about as, that could arguably be the best defensive lineman in this draft. Had some success with the LSU Tigers. I'm going to go with defensive lineman Paris Shand
Ooh,
at number 4, a player that is possibly going to get some UDFA looks. He had some pretty impressive, or some pretty good numbers. I wouldn't say impressive, but a pretty good showing at his pro day at LSU. So I would think that he's probably going to get a little bit of a UDFA look. Probably not a guy that you see in the CFL right away, but a guy that grew up in Toronto, has some legit ties to Canada, Canadian football. I think is a guy that would be interested in coming back if playing isn't a thing that happens for him right away, and is a very talented player. So I'm going to go with somebody that I think is maybe not a player that we see in the CFL right away, but possibly a player that they can develop into something in a few years, going at number 4.
yeah. So Montreal is now on the clock. Um, Man, you want to pick a team that doesn't really have many Canadian holes? It's the Alouettes. I think their biggest hole would probably be offensive line in terms of the unknowns versus the knowns within that group. Um, but yeah, I mean Montreal is arguably the best um, Canadian depth team in the league right now, in my opinion. But it seems kind of like a foregone conclusion. A lot of people have him here, and I don't want to copy. I don't want to come off as copying, but he is arguably the best, if not, like the second best offensive lineman in this draft. And I'm going with Christopher Fortin out of Connecticut. Um, he's a Quebec native, could play inside or outside. He most likely uh, slots in as a right guard, but could slot over to the left side. So I don't know. I think Fortin going here, I wouldn't say it's a reach, but I think it fills kind of their only desperate need heading into 2025.
Okay, I like it. Christophe Fortin, and obviously a Quebec native. I like it. So that puts me back up on the clock with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And I'll be honest, Shane, to let you inside a little bit of my GM hat, this is where I think the conversation for me really starts of the quarterback going. I think of Winnipeg maybe was able to keep some of their roster together with some of their pieces leaving in free agency. I would maybe consider going with a quarterback here, considering that maybe once Zach Collaros leaves in a few years, there's the transition at quarterback. That being said, I think I'm going to go with a little bit of an off the board pick here um, with Winnipeg. Jackson Finley has been mocked here a few times, and I think that is a great fit. I really do. I think him with in a Mike O'Shea defense, where he would be able to just fit in multiple positions, and is a culture guy that fits in within that locker room, that they do good in the community, they play good on the field. I'm not going there, Shane. I'm going to go off the board. They lost receiver Kenny Lawler in free agency this past year. Nick Dembski is getting a little bit older. Dalton Schoen coming off the torn ACL. I'm going to go with wide receiver. Which one? Shane's heart is beating.
I have a feeling if
Uh,
you don't go, I feel like you're going Keelan Wade on this one, but are you going to go Ethan Jordan?
I'm going to go. I will leave him on the board for you, Shane. I was going Keelan White the whole time, though. I wanted to build a little expense for you. I know your heart was beating. I know that's your boy
Hey,
trying to get in. I know.
hey,
I'm
man,
just bugging.
if he
I'm just bugging.
ends, I think he's going to go into like he's going to come into the league and he's going to be. People are going to look at him no matter where he gets drafted. If it's on the first round, people by the end of the year, by the end of 2025, I have a feeling that people are going to look at him and be like, "Damn,
Should have
like
drafted him
it's
higher.
like the Julian Juice like situation. Like, damn, how did we let him slip so far? Like, I look at him and I'm like, this guy is the Canadian version of like, I mean, he's almost approached like a cut and copy Nick Dembski.
Yeah.
Like if you watch those two play, they're very comparable, in my opinion. Um, like I look at what Braylon Addison did during like when he was healthy, and there was a lot of guys like that, and I just think that he is the guy that you put him in, and he's gonna make plays. That's it. Like you plug him in, and he's gonna make plays for you.
Well, Shane, we will see how many picks I got left. Calgary. I have Calgary, Edmonton, and BC. But that being said, I'm going to go with Keelan White, wide receiver out of University of Montana at number 6 to Winnipeg. Like you mentioned about some of their losses, Nick Dempsey getting a little bit older. I think he will be a player that kind of graces pretty well and with age. He's never really been a burner, never been somebody that runs past you, but a very crafty route runner. Um, the corner's coming and he's still getting open on the corner routes all these years. I think it's just kind of an off the board pick, but also I think somewhere where, add more weapons to that offense as much as possible. With an aging Zach Collaros, you're hoping that you can maybe get hit a little bit from a few years ago, obviously with his down year this past year. So, um, like I said, I thought about Jackson Finley with not wanting to, obviously, as you mentioned, Shane, with Montreal, not wanting to copy too many mocks, seeing that's been happening a little bit the last few. I'm going to go off the board with a receiver going at number 6. So that turns it over to you, Shane, with Toronto.
Yeah. So with Toronto on the clock, I'm gonna go with Jackson Finley here. Out of Western. You lose Adeleke. You've lost Mechie. He could probably by week 6, week 7 start playing himself into a starter role. I think it's been talked about widely within the CFL community about how effective he could be as a starter, and not even just as a safety, as probably your field side half, where he's a little bit less exposed because he'll have some help. But I don't know. I think you've lost some Canadian depth within your secondary. That just makes too much sense. I mean, yeah, you've had some O-line holes, but I think if Jackson Finley's there at number 7, you have to jump on it. That's too good to pass up, in my opinion.
Yeah, you know how high I am on Jackson. I think outside kind of for me, there's not really a consensus top 3. I would say it's more of a consensus kind of Connor Shea and Darian Newell. And then outside of that, there's kind of a lot of like how will kind of in what situations will some of these guys land. So I think kind of find out who are the best prospects and best pros. Jackson Finley, I think, is a guy that's going to be able to, sink or swim as a rookie. I think he's going to be able to swim. I don't necessarily know if he's going to be able to start right away, but I think he's a guy that plays in the CFL for, more than the average length of a career. And I'm excited to see where he lands. I would like to see him, stay in a place that he's familiar with in Ontario, playing at University of Western. So, and with his family ties as well to the CFL, having some family football history in the CFL already, I think is some cool ties as well. So that puts me back on the clock with the Calgary
Calgary
Stampeders.
Stampeders, thanks to your
This,
BC Lions.
yes. So who is still available here? So, I think I'm gonna go with something that was talked about at possibly number 1, and that was the ties to University of Montana with Dave Dickinson. I'm gonna go with Hayden Harris, defensive lineman out of University of Montana. Another guy that I'm curious to see if he does get any UDFA looks, but a lengthy pass rusher, a guy that I don't believe has any familiarity with the Canadian game. So I'm curious to see how long it would take for him to come up here, adapt to that kind of style of play. Personally, why I don't have him, I'm high on his I guess like prototype and the style of player he is, but I'm just curious of how well he can kind of come up here, adapt to the playing style and the lifestyle and stuff like that. So I like him as a prospect, but I'm going to go with Hayden Harris at number 8
Yeah,
for
and
the Calgary Stampeders.
that rounds up the first round. And just to recap quickly, number 1 was Connor Shea, linebacker out of Wyoming, going to Calgary. Darian Newell, defensive lineman out of Queens, going to Hamilton, which kind of seems the generic 1-2 across most boards. Jalen Smith, linebacker, North Texas, going to the Red Blacks. Paris Shan, D lineman out of LSU, going to the Rough Riders. Christopher Fortan, offensive lineman, Connecticut, going to Montreal at number 5. Keelan White, receiver out of Montana, going number 6 to the Blue Bombers. Jackson Finley, defensive back, Western, going to Toronto. And then ending it off with our second pick, Hayden Harris, defensive lineman out of Montana, going to the Stampeders. And we're going to kick off round 2 with Hamilton. And
Oh,
goddamn, Hamilton has holes. And they aren't just small holes. They are Swiss cheese, in my opinion. I know there's some places, there's some mocks that have him going, um, doubling up on defense, going either D line or receiver or D line linebacker, depending on who you look, like which ones you look at. And don't get me wrong, they need. I don't think you can go wrong going either or, but that defensive line, they need more defensive line help than they do offensive line or linebacker help, in my opinion, um, based on their current depth chart. So I'm going back to the defensive line, and someone who I'm not sure if this is a reach and how much he might actually like what his UDFA, if any UDFA potential there is. But I'm going to Bowling Green. I'm taking defensive lineman Ali Sad. He can play both inside out. I think he played most of the snaps this year with Bowling Green as an edge rusher. But I think that's you get your interior guy with Newell, you get some exterior help, and the likelihood of having a high quality linebacker kind of at their third round in the third round is going to be hard. But I think you go two D lines and you hope that's enough where if they can become effective starters, you maybe run 3 Americans back there instead of needing a Canadian depth linebacker spot.
okay. So Ali Sad going number 9 to the Ticats is what Shane is, and that puts me on the clock with Edmonton. Edmonton for the first time.
Yeah, after losing their pick.
Alrighty, Shane. This is where things get interesting. Now, like I was saying, with like on my board, my top 3 prospects right now would be Ethan Jordan, Eric Anderson, Sam Carson. Um, I don't see a receiver kind of fit here. I don't know if offensive lineman is really necessarily a need as well. Um, but a player that I had that I'm very high on that wasn't on my list was a defensive lineman that I don't necessarily know if that's really a fit as well with some of their additions in the offseason with Jeremiah Ojo. I'm a big Jeremiah Ojo fan. I don't know if necessarily Edmonton is the right place for him to um, go in terms of a situation. So I kind of tossed that idea out of the window. So um, when thinking back to it, I kind of have 2 thoughts here. Although they have been very active when drafting linebackers in the last few years, you drafted Jalen Smith at number 6, was it, or number 4 or
Number 3.
3? Number 3, which leaves Devin Varasek, and then there's kind of a drop off at linebacker. Um, I'm gonna go with Devin Varasek 'cause I think he is a guy that hasn't been talked about as a day one starter or anything like that. I think he's gonna be able to come in, contribute on special teams for them, be a player that gets a jersey on game day with not really seeing a fit, not wanting to force an offensive lineman because I don't know if that offensive lineman can dress really on game days with, some of who's on their roster already. David Beard obviously coming over in free agency. Um, and then, like I said about Ethan Jordan, I don't think that's necessarily um, a fit there as well either. So I'm going to go with Devin Varasek, linebacker out of University of Windsor.
Which is funny
Uh,
because you took him for Hamilton during our content. Um,
at number 9, the previous
Number
pick.
9. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
great linebacker. I think if he played in a bigger program outside of Windsor, he probably gets like top, like first round consideration as that number 1, number 2 linebacker, more
yeah,
so than he does playing out of Windsor.
yeah. So that would leave me on the clock to make
Yeah,
BC's
you got BC
first
coming out.
first selection. Now, Shane, I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna let. I'm gonna be fully transparent here. We're gonna talk. We're gonna walk through this together, buddy. All right, and you're gonna have every chance to deal or no deal me, or whatever you wanna kind of call it. Like I was saying about who I have currently on who my top three would be Eric Anderson, Sam Carson, and Ethan Jordan. Now, when looking at the offensive lineman class, there's not really um, a consensus top lineman. There's kind of a few guys discussed throughout the top, and then there's not really that much depth throughout the class. And I actually look here, and we still have actually quite a bit of depth with who's still on the board: Ethan Bybert, Arvin Asani from
You're also
UBC,
you're fading Tiger
Tiger
Shank,
Shanks.
who
So
I think, if you're asking my opinion on who BC should pick, that should be the spot, in my opinion.
yeah, I would say that if we didn't just trade for Dejon Allen, because I think Tiger Shanks is kind of he played strictly tackle, I believe, at University of
He's a right
UN, I believe,
tackle.
and that's who we just traded for, Dejon Allen, who plays right tackle. So
I thought he played left. I thought
no,
his
Jarrell Broxton's our left tackle. Um, so I agree with offensive linemen being a need for this team. I just think this team needs to take as many swings as possible at the position to try to get better there. I don't think tackle is necessarily the place to do it. I think it's at the interior. I think all three interior spots are kind of up for grabs, and there's not really any necessarily um, uh, for sure guys in Sharpie, let's say. Mike Couture might be, just considering his contract size and not wanting to sit that on the bench. But I think it's up for discussion whether or not he should even be the starter. I think we saw Tyler Packer come in last year and play, maybe not as high of a ceiling as Mike Couture once did, but I think the same floor when he came in. So I think there should be questions about that. That being said, I think there's enough offensive linemen to let one of them hopefully fall to me at 19. So where my discussions would come back to is I think Jeremiah Ojo, with Matthew Betts being one of our defensive linemen. I've mentioned a few times with you, Shane, that Sione Tiama's on the 6-game suspension list. And I think having that, we need kind of that other guy opposite of Matthew Betts. We've seen it a few years ago with a guy like David Menard having a high motor kind of guy opposite of Matthew Betts. That was when Matthew Betts was able to have his best season, as we saw. So Jeremiah Ojo has been a very guy that I've thought about this. Now, that being said, I will be honest. Ethan Jordan has fully been in conversation to play field wide receiver for the BC Lions. As you know, losing Alex Hollins this past year, Justin McInnis with Keon Hatcher probably going to most likely mound the boundary positions. Keon Hatcher, I think the question's still out on him. If we're going to see him ever get back to that 1,000-yard form we did in 2023, you look to the field and Javon Katoy, I'm pretty confident in him. I like a guy like Eden Eberhardt, but a guy like Stanley Berrios, I think is there's questions about him. And I think would be a great fit within that offense to have a guy like Ethan Jordan come play your field wide receiver position, take the top off the defense, be able to be a reliable guy. So to be honest, I'm going between Jeremiah Ojo right now and Ethan Jordan, Shane. I will give you one chance to maybe sway one way or the other, Shane, or just even add a comment because Ottawa is on the clock next.
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say don't pick Ethan Jordan just because Ottawa is after. Because, like, realistically, I think, again, he's going to be a reliable, durable star player in this league no matter where he ends up. I like him, Ojo. I mean, you don't have a lot of depth on that defensive line, the Canadian defensive depth. So you're looking at it from a production standpoint. Who do you have that if Betts goes down? Who do you have to replace it? That can fill that void as a Canadian, right? But I mean, hey, you pick who you
Okay,
think
so
is best for the team.
I've heard enough. At least, okay, just at least give me this, and then I will make my pick. That it's a good, like reason for Ethan Jordan being selected here. That there is an
Oh,
actual
100%.
like,
I mean,
there
I
is
think
actually.
realistically, any like Hamilton, you know, they have some offensive depth, but I think Ethan again, every team can make a solid argument, in my opinion, to select a guy like Ethan Jordan. There's no doubt in my mind that if BC were to draft him, and I think it's a smart pick. I think if you're looking at it from a 3,000 foot, angle, you have two. If you can have two Canadian starters in that five receiver front, you're going to have the ability to move pieces around, especially on defense, which we know people love to do. But more importantly, he's probably going to be your most inside guy to start, which is the closest guy to Nathan Rourke. He has great route running ability. You can get him open. Rourke can throw him open. It just means that you're going to be forced to have a line. Like he's going to get covered by the Sam. Realistically, that's who you're probably going to try to line him up against. Is that Sam line, like that Sam corner, whatever you want to call it nowadays. That position. I'm taking that every day. I am going up. I'm going to take. There are very few Sam linebackers that I would feel comfortable lining up directly one-on-one with him. So there's a very solid argument for BC to take him here. And if you take him, you're going to be looking at like a consistent 1,000-yard receiver.
All right, Shane, you've done your I won't even say it persuading because you actually did a great job of lobbying for both players here. Um, I think where I agree with you. I think you're probably a little bit more higher on Ethan Jordan than I am. But I was saying that I have him as a top 10 prospect in this class. I think he's going to pan out to be one of the more productive pros when it comes to production. I would love to pull trigger on receiver here. I don't think it is probably responsible. I think should be a discussion as I kind of laid out. I think there's a clear and obvious position there for him. Um, I don't know if the Lions would want to play three Canadian receivers with having Justin McInnis, Javon Katoy already on the roster, offensive line with Mike Couture, and probably going to start a Canadian left guard, Canadian obviously at quarterback. Um, you're kind of already getting into the 5-6 range there before even getting on defense. So I think the responsible play here is to go Jeremiah Ojo, defensive lineman at the University of Montreal. And I think for one reason that kind of persuaded me over the other, Shane, is in the last few years, the Lions, I think you could argue that, their skill has been up there with the best of them in the CFL. It's just in the trenches with, protecting their quarterback, number one, and being able to affect the other team's quarterback and or get pressure in the run game. Specifically in the playoffs, we've seen with when Saskatchewan eliminated us this past year, Winnipeg the previous two West Finals, and even in at times during the regular season where we get gashed by some of these opponents. So I'm going to go with Jeremiah Ojo. I think pairing him with a guy like Matthew Betts for a few years to come on a rookie deal for the first 3 years. Like I mentioned with David Menard, another Canadian opposite of him. You'll have three Canadians possibly being in rotation to start with Christian Covington obviously being inside, and then with Matthew Betts as well. So I'm going to go with Jeremiah Ojo to the BC Lions at number 11. And Shane has full green light to go with his guy at number 12. But Shane, you're back on the clock with your
Yes, I
Ottawa.
am. I'm back on the clock with the Red Blacks. Then you're back on with the Rough Riders. Then I'm back on with Montreal, and I think I'm going to make a splash with Montreal here.
Nice. Sorry,
Um,
Shane, who did you go at number 10? Or who did I go at number 10?
do, 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 do. Number 10, you went Verisek, linebacker out of Windsor.
Okay, I'm not
And at number 11, you went Jeremiah Ojo,
Okay, we're good.
D-line out of Montreal. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go with Ethan Jordan out of, like, Ethan Jordan, receiver out of Laurier. I think I've made my spiel before and multiple other times. Um, there's his play. Go watch him in Laurier. I know, yes, he played with Elgersma, but like just watch his route running, watch his ability to create space, and watch his ability. Like he is just a really athletic player who can make things happen. So him at number 12, you slot him behind Marin, like um, Marner, and kind of as like behind Justin Hardy and Braylon Addison. I think he's going to be a future 1,000 yard receiver in this league, and I wouldn't be shocked if he does it within his first 2 years.
I love it. EJ, Ethan Jordan going at number 12 to the Ottawa Red Blacks. Shane, I mean, he's got to know, like, Shane Ryan is number one Ethan Jordan supporter, man. You took him in all three. Obviously, this time you get him maybe in a range that I think you're able to probably get a player at number three as well. Get him at number 12, and I think is probably best case scenario for you. I believe you don't. Do you pick in? No, you don't pick in round
I
threes,
don't have
right?
a third round
Uh,
pick, so
so
like
so it's
you
a nice,
know,
I think, draft for you right now. I would imagine this is maybe ideal for next Tuesday of
yeah,
like if this can happen, I
yeah.
would
And I
love
mean,
it.
again, I try to dive pretty heavily into the draft stuff, and like even Keelan White, I don't think Keelan White's a better receiver prospect in my opinion. There are things that he does better, but I think Keelan White isn't someone who will command the defense in a way that Ethan Jordan will. I also it's the same thing with Alfred. I don't think Alfred's 6'6". He's going to command the defense the same way Eugene Lewis does, but that only works if you have another four guys to get the ball to. And I have concerns with where he fits in a CFL system. But yeah, I mean, I think Jordan out of the top three, he's the most pop and play receiver in my opinion. Out of the three, I think he'll fit into any system with any team.
I like it. So Ethan Jordan going number 12, which puts me back on the clock with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I think this is honestly a tough one for me here, Shane, when thinking about the Roughriders when like I was saying at number 4, not a lot of holes on the roster right now, and um I think they're a really complete team. So personally, Shane, I'm actually gonna return it back to you before I pick. I'm thinking about an offensive lineman here because I think it's been too long before an offensive lineman has gone here. Other than Christoph Hortan, I believe is the only offensive lineman we've taken so far. So that's the way I'm leaning, Shane. But is there a way right now, or is there a player that's kind of sticking out on your board right now that you'd like to see it go to Saskatchewan?
Not really. I mean, I think that the back half of the second round is kind of where you're going to see a lot of the offensive linemen taken next, like on Tuesday on the 29th. Um, Saskatchewan needs that like needs that help. I just don't know which offensive lineman you go with, right? You still have Carson, you still have Anderson, you have Husini, you have Vibert, you have Shank. Like you have some quality offensive linemen available. Um, you have Berwick. I mean, I think Berwick's kind of a reach here, but you have some really quality linemen you can slot in at this pick without really hurting. Like it's not going to be why'd you pick him here. I think you're going to see all of those five guys drafted between now and uh, again the end of the second round. So I don't know. I think Sam Carson, he has some tackle experience. He could most likely slides inside. Um, but he played left tackle in college, so having a having a Canadian left tackle would be ratio breaking in that regard. I think it's between Carson and Anderson in my opinion. I think Vibert it's a little too early, but it really depends on how you view him. But I think Carson here is or Anderson is the pick.
Yeah, so the guys that I was thinking actually were Tiger Shanks and Sam Carson right now. And at number 4, obviously we went with Paris Shan, who's kind of a CU in a few years. kind of guy, which Tiger Shanks could be as well. So it would be unfortunate for Saskatchewan to kind of not waste necessarily the first two picks, but not maybe see dividends for the first few seasons. Um, so that being
My
said, I'm actually
thing,
gonna
my thing
yeah,
with
go ahead,
Ty,
Shane.
like with Shanks with Rough Riders, is the same reason why you didn't think he'd work in BC is that he is a tackle, right? I think if you go with someone like Carson, he gives you that tackle guard flexibility that you have Furlan who played all five positions last year with the Rough Riders. Don't really think you want him doing that again. So having someone who can slot in and you know if needed could be would be the pick here, in my opinion, going with Carson, just because you want to have someone other than Furlan jumping around that offensive line.
Yeah, I'm gonna let you talk me into that one, Shane. I think he also has Calgary, Alberta kid, played for the University of Calgary, has that actually, I feel like, want to maybe come back up here. And some of these guys that are, Canadian by my parents are born, and sometimes they're not necessarily sure on the Canadian Football League, and fair enough, with not enough attention kind of being shown to the league and being able to show some of these kids that it's a legitimate league and the second best professional league in the world. So I'm going to go with Sam Carson, offensive lineman out of Louisiana Monroe, the Warhawks. Shane, I had no idea where Louisiana Monroe was until we did a little bit of research. The Warhawks. I'm going to go with Sam Carson, and that
Yeah,
sends you back on the clock, I believe, right with
with
Montreal.
Montreal, with the
Yeah,
Montreal Alouettes. And this one's an interesting one because again, the team doesn't have a lot of holes. Um, you know, they picked up their offensive lineman in the first round. Um, I think if Jeremiah Ojo did fall here, I think he would be the slam dunk number one pick for the 14th overall. Um, I'm not going quarterback. I'm not going offensive line, and this is kind of where things get a little dicey, in my opinion, because I think there's not a huge gap between the middle of the second and the like the third, between their pick now and their two picks in the third round. I don't think there's a huge talent gap. So it may seem like a reach for them to pick someone here that might have been like a lower second, early third, but I don't think there's a big enough gap to offset it. But I don't think they're going to go too off board here. Um, I think they go receiver, and I think they go uh, and bring in
Alfred,
Alford out of out
Utah.
of Utah. And the only reason why I think they go after Alford is that he can sit. There's really no um, expectations for him to come in and be a guy right away. He can kind of come in, get his reps, and just be part of the team. And in case you have injuries and whatnot, that's where he'll make his debut. But I think him at 6'6", he can you know can create different looks and get Velpot open or Mac open. Like I just think that the possibilities are there for him.
I love it. So Damien Alford comes off the board, third receiver taken within the top 20 picks. And outside of that, that's kind of the receivers until some of these mid-rounder guys, which stay tuned actually, Shane. I had the top 10 prospects. I'm gonna put out a top 10 sleepers, and there's gonna be a couple of receivers on there. I know you're a fan of the couple of them. So
Yep.
I guess that puts me back on the clock with Winnipeg, correct?
Yeah. Yes. You're Winnipeg, and then I'm Toronto, and then you're on the clock for three in a row, going from Calgary,
Alrighty.
Winnipeg, and BC to end the second round with the compensatory picks at number 18 and 19.
Alrighty, Shane. I know how the both of us feel, so I'm curious to see how this might have a trickle effect on you. I talked about where the quarterback conversation started for me was at 6 in the first round. I'm gonna go and pull trigger for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers here with Curtis Rourke coming off the board. I'm curious to see what you do now with Algersma, I think there is a fit in with the next pick, and maybe your um what goes on with your thinking now here. But I'm gonna go with Curtis Rourke with the fact that I just don't think that there is a glaring prospect coming off the board. I thought about offensive lineman here with their offensive line getting older, losing some additions in the offense. But with having the extra pick coming up here in a few picks, I think I'm going to be able to have enough linemen on the board or enough players on the board at that position that I feel a little more comfortable with. Like I said about it earlier, I still think that Elgerman and Rourke are by far, in a way, the two best prospects. I think Elgers must fit with maybe an Eastern Division teams a little bit better than with Winnipeg and or Calgary. So going with the fit, I'm going to go with Rourke over Elgersma here to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at 16 or at 15.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yes.
think does that mean El Grisma is going to drop out of the first round or out of the second round? Because I don't see Cal or Toronto taking him. Because I mean,
That's
again, they're
that's up to
probably
you.
they're probably taking. They're going to look at some offensive line help because they do have some holes there. There's also some defensive line help. They had a max exodus on the defensive line. Uh, they have some holes. I mean, they got Jackson Finley. This one's hard because offensive line or defensive line, I think you've got to go one of those two. Um, but I'm going to stick with. I'm going to do Eric Anderson out of Western. He can play all three guard. He can play both guard positions. He can play center. Projects more as a center in this league, but can fill in as that guard. I really like him. I think he fills a hole. Probably doesn't start week one, but could easily be a starter by the end of the season.
You that was you got me there, Shane. I was hoping he was gonna fall. Having three picks on the board, I was gonna be able to just it was like it was fate. He fell to 19, but I love Eric Anderson, man. I think he is um got pro offensive lineman written all over him when you watch this film, and like you mentioned about the position flexibility, a guy that I think can legitimately try to play tackle right away, but having the ability to kick inside and play all those positions as well, I think provides him great valuable when it comes to drafting him in the draft, as well as being a part of arguably I would imagine they say the best run game, but one up there in terms of one of the top rushing games, rushing attacks in the country with Western Mustangs. So I love Eric Anderson, big fan of him, which puts me on the clock with Calgary, correct?
Yes, you have Calgary, and then at 17, Winnipeg at 18, BC at 19.
So I am gonna go here with having already went. Would we go Connor Shea, Hayden Harris at number 8? I'm gonna take a offensive lineman here. I'm going to go with Ethan Vibert.
Ooh,
Um, I
are you
think
doing this because you want Husseini at number 19? Is that where you're going?
partially yes. Um, but I think that we saw what VA was capable when he was upright, and I think not really having any glaring prospects. I think you could argue like Husseini obviously to me is I like him a little bit more, but Viber kind of these are kind of the late rounder, kind of the late second, early third round conversation guys. With Shanks is obviously still on the board, but all the top offensive linemen are kind of off the board now, and I think it's kind of not really you're kind of picking hairs, I guess.
Well,
Is
yeah,
kind
I
of what I'm
mean,
getting at. And I think
yeah,
he fits a little bit more what kind of like that mauling style. I know I talked about it with when I wanted BC to get Viber in the creators one that I like that's what he brought. I think that's kind of what they need a little bit with in Calgary. And I think being able to have him go there is what I'm going to do because like you called me out for, Shane, I want Hussein to fall to 19, which is going to be able to happen because um, I'm going to go with at 18, Shane. I'm going to go with Nate Boschman, defensive back. Jackson Finley had been mocked here quite a bit, and I think they're two similar players. I'm much higher on Jackson Finley than Nate, but Nate being the for or the this past year's President Trophy winner for the best defensive player in the country, has a resume proven for himself. He played at Calgary the last few years when they were unfortunately losing a lot more games, not being able to, I think, get as much credit as he deserves. And I think he is the second best defensive back in this class. And I think that's not really a necessarily a slight at him. I think he's going to be able to be a good pro. I just kind of maybe question his starting ability, like his, I guess, his ceiling, where his floor, I think, is pretty high coming in, but I don't know how much he's going to be able to get better as a professional. So I'm going to go with Nate Boschman. Obviously, they have Reddy Cramby already at starting at Sam, but Nate's another guy that can play safety, can play Sam a little bit, having experience playing Sam at University of Calgary, could play field half as well. But a guy that's going to be able to be a playmaker, and I think he fits what Michael Shea does on defense as well. And that brings me to BC, which you already know who I'm going here, Shane. Arvin Husseini, University of BC offensive lineman, guy that was pretty quiet coming into the combine, other than some of his pro day numbers. And I know his teammates, having talked to Theo a little bit, very highly when we talked to him last year coming off the combine, talking about this upcoming class when he mentioned these two offensive linemen, Isaiah Knight, kind of thinking that he's just kind of being a biased teammate, not really thinking too much of it. Um, Arvin, like I mentioned, not really been talked about too much until the combine, and now getting some praise. His stock has definitely climbed a little bit more. But like I said before, I think his stock has climbed, but I don't think he has crept into the first three offensive linemen coming off the board. I think he's going to be within that kind of fourth, fifth, or sixth lineman that comes off the board within that 15th to 25 pick range. I think he's a good player that you could bring in, not start right away. Hopefully, he turns into something, learns, soaks up what information you're able to give him with what he was able to do with a legendary university, but professionally coached with the late Dan Durazio, obviously, who coached at UBC the last few years and has developed Theo Benedet, Gio Manu. Gavin Coates is another sleeper coming out of this offensive lineman class, and that is why I will go with Arvin Husseini to end the second round, which actually, Shane, I get 4 picks right away because Calgary is up to start
Calgary
the
is up.
third round. Shane, is there anything you recapped the first round? You might as well
Yeah.
recap the second round as well.
So we got starting at the second round at ninth overall with Hamilton is Ali Saad, defensive lineman out of Bowling Green. Coming in at number 10 out of Windsor, linebacker Devin Verisek going to the Edmonton Elks. Number 11, Jeremiah Ojo, defensive line Montreal going to the BC Lions. Number 12, you got Ethan Jordan, receiver out of Laurier going to the Ottawa Redblacks. Number 13 is Samuel Carson, offensive line at Louisiana at Monroe, going to the Rough Riders. Number 14 is Damian Alford, receiver out of Utah, going to the Montreal Alouettes. Number 15 is Curtis Rourke, quarterback out of Indiana, going to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. You got at number 16, you got Eric Anderson, offensive lineman out of Western, going to the Toronto Argonauts. Out at number 17, you got Ethan Vibert, offensive lineman, South Dakota State, going to the Calgary Stampeders. Number 18, you got Nate Boschman, defensive back, Calgary, going to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And to end it all off is number 19, Arvin Husseini, offensive lineman out of University of British Columbia, going to the BC Lions. Kicking off round 3 is we have the Calgary Stampeders picking at 20th. We got 8 picks this round.
Alrighty, Shane. We're about an hour in, so this is like perfect timing here. We're going, buddy. So with the Calgary Stampeders, I just took the offensive lineman Ethan Vibert. Now, I'll be honest, Shane, I'm unfortunately not doing as well as one Cliffy, Mark Steven did, because man, what a haul he was able to take
Man,
home.
Mark Steven got Keelan White,
Connor Shea
Connor Shea,
was it?
Damian Alford. Like he cleaned house
He did, and
with the pick, like the 4 picks he had.
I will. What I got one of them. So I got Connor Shea, excuse me, Hayden Harris. So we got a linebacker, a defensive lineman, and then just took the offensive lineman Ethan Vibert,
Yeah.
um, offensive line here. So with Calgary having a ton of picks, they have still one more, or no, they don't have
No,
one more.
this is their last pick at 20. Also,
So
I
I
said
think
8. I meant 9 picks, by the way. There's 9 picks left.
Right. Um, with having this, I think you're going to want to try to, um, you know, I guess in my opinion, take what's left of maybe the last. I don't know if you'd call it a blue chip prospect, but I think a guy that has maybe the highest ceiling from the players, some of the players that are available. And I'm going to double dip here, Shane. I'm going to go another offensive lineman. I'm going to go with Tiger Shanks. I think this
Ooh,
is an appropriate territory for him with Calgary just needing help. We saw it last year. Maybe you could credit a little bit of that to Jake Mayer holding the ball a little bit.
a
But
little bit.
when a lot bit, um, that when VA is able to be kept upright, and I don't think a guy like Taylor Shanks is a guy, or Ethan Viber maybe is necessarily year one guys, but to maybe fulfill the length of the contract that the VA is under now is having as many, uh, I guess, swings at bat to try to stabilize yourself at the offensive line position. Because like I said, if VA is able to stay upright, go through his reads, deliver the ball, he's a very effective quarterback. I would argue the best, if not one of the best quarterbacks in the CFL when he's able to stay clean in the pocket there. So I'm going to go with Tiger Shanks with kind of, not really any kind of prospects that I think are must go here. I think Tiger Shanks is. There's been obviously a lot of conversation with him the last 2 months, with him being a late addition into the CFL draft pool, being an NCAA guy, so he does get a little bit more of that attention, that media when he signs in 3 downs, doing articles and stuff like that. So we're learning a little bit more about him. I think we're going to try to take a swing here for the Calgary Stampeders and go with the offensive lineman out of UNLV.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm gonna
Or
go with. I'm gonna go
sorry,
take a swing.
sorry, Shane, is he already off the board?
Who?
Tiger Shanks.
I don't believe so. I don't remember. Nope. We talked about him, but because I mentioned it being in
Who do you have
being
at
one.
13?
Samuel Carson.
Okay, nice. Perfect. Okay. Continue.
Um,
That was the
Going
20th
in at
pick.
number 21
Yeah.
for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And again, they need some defensive line or defensive tackle help or linebacker help here. But I think I'm going to go a little bit off board. I'm going to take the second quarterback off of the day, kind of end his slide because I think, again, coming into the third round might be a little bit of a slide for him. I am taking Taylor Elgersma out of Laurier at 21 to Hamilton. It just, you know, I don't know how much Powell has. Even if he is, you have that 3 year window where he might not, like, you can develop him. Like, quarterbacks take so long to develop in this league. You still have Bo Levi. You have Tagovailoa back there, but you really don't know what he's, capable of yet. Taking him at 21, not that, like, I think the risk reward is just too great to pass up here at 21 for him.
For sure. I like that. Um, and it's crazy, like you say, right? It's a slide, right? Because obviously Elgersma is not the 21st best player in this draft, but this is probably, a pretty close range to where we're going to maybe see him get drafted on Tuesday. So I'm just curious what team decides that, what, let's take the chance at him with knowing that you're not going to get any dividends for the first few years. So that puts me back up on the clock with the Edmonton Elks.
Elks, number 22.
I'm going to go with somebody that I am very high on that has been a little bit of a sleeper. I don't believe he was, or actually, I think he was actually taken in our creators mock draft, but not our first one that we did in the 2 round ones. A guy that I'm very high on, Shane. I just put out the prospects to watch series. I'm going to go with University of Laval defensive back Anton Hay
Ooh,
here at 22, a guy that's a little bit of a sleeper right now, but when you turn on his highlight tape, man, he jumps off the screen. A guy that had, like, no exaggeration, 6 or 7 block punts on special teams. And when you're getting into this range, obviously you'd love to have him as a first year starter, but you're kind of getting into the special teams range now of wanting to have him hopefully contribute, if not maybe in year one and year two. And I think this is a perfect guy to get in, develop him as a defensive player. He's going to be able to provide you special teams right away. A guy that played 4 phases of special teams at Laval. a guy that played safety, halfback, and corner at Laval, has the position flexibility, and like I mentioned about he had like I don't know if you've watched him quite yet, Shane, but if you turn it on, it's a couple minutes into his highlight tape. He has 6 or 7 block punts in a row from his university career, and is a guy that I think is going to be able to be very special on special teams. I don't know if that's going to translate to having 2, 3 block punts a year, but a guy that may be able to be effective when he is on the field and is comfortable when in some of those positions already. So I'm going to go with Anton Hay at number 22,
Yeah,
which
I mean, I
goes
think
back to you, Shane.
there's been a couple of mock drafts. I know John Hodges' second mock draft, Anton Hay actually went 21 to Hamilton. So I think that's actually a really good spot for him. Um, I'm going to continue with the defensive back uh, trend. Um, I am going out of Ottawa. Eric Cumberbatch, defensive back. I've had the pleasure of watching him over the last couple of years. I think he's a guy that probably, again, will make a bigger impact on special teams before he makes an impact defensively. But his impact on special teams will keep him on the team to a point where he will be able to make an impact defensively. I really like him. I think players like once he gets on the field, like fans are gonna really like him. He's gonna turn into a fan favorite. He's a guy who plays every down like it's his last down. Like he does not give up on plays. Like he does not take anything for granted. Um, he is just a workhorse. Like he's leaving it all out there on the field every single game. And I think Montreal fans and the guys in the locker room will respect that, and fans will love it. So I got Eric Cumberbatch out of Ottawa going to Montreal here at 23.
I like it. So that brings the Edmonton Elks back up on the clock. Oh, judging by our little thing, they never left the clock. So um, they have. Yeah, it's going to be a curious one for Edmonton, right? With they were I guess, it's an interesting one, Shane. Obviously, every year it's had the conversation of like the winners of free agency, right? And some years it can, translate to wins on the field, but other years it's, basically
Most
you
years,
got, yeah, most years it's
most years,
you got an off-season banner for
4 wins.
building some excitement for the upcoming season, which is good for the league and stuff like that, but it doesn't always translate on the field. So it's an interesting one for Edmonton here with trying to be effective with no first round pick, 1 pick in the second round, and then 2 quick picks to start the third round with trying to be effective here with who they're going to land and try to bring in. And obviously, you mentioned with Montreal's Canadians being probably the most well-rounded in the league. Edmonton, with some of their additions they brought in the offseason, are pretty well suited with probably being able to start, 8, 9 Canadians this upcoming year. So not really seeing a clear pathway here, Shane. Some of the guys that I am kind of going through, I'd love to hear kind of who you would would kind of maybe think of who would go here, but a guy that I'm high on with, another kind of paying attention to my sleepers thing is definitely gonna butcher this name, but University of Windsor defensive lineman, 2-time second team All Canadian. Like I said, I'm gonna butcher this name, so let's wait for draft day and then see how it's actually pronounced. But Kulad Amusin, I believe is how it's pronounced.
Oh, the defensive
Um,
lineman, yeah, Kulad. I think it's Kulad Musin.
Kulad
Um,
Amusin, 6'1", 247 pound, edge rusher, kind of more of a 3-4 type uh outside linebacker, I guess if you want to maybe put it in that to for NFL fans. Um a guy who was very productive throughout his university career, and um there's some of the blue chip talents up at the top of the draft with Darian Newell, Paris Shand, Ali Sad, some of those guys, but other than that there's some of these late rounder guys that are kind of a little bit more quiet. Max Van Mildorfer is another guy that I'm very high on. I don't know if this is maybe where I want to go with him right here. But Kulad Amusin, like I was mentioning, um, Delonte Robinson's another one with having to kind of double dip here. But I guess that's kind of bringing me to my answer here. I might go with D Lyman, Shane. But is there any maybe fits you'd like to see here with Edmonton?
no, I mean I think D line. If you're looking at a development angle makes a lot of sense. Based on who they brought in, like they have quite a bit of Canadian talent.
They do.
But I think defensive line, I mean, you can never have too many. It's like offensive line, right? You can never have too many quality offensive linemen, and you can never have too many quality defensive Canadian linemen. So I have no issue with the pick here. I think it might be a little bit of a reach. There might be some people who look at this and be like, "Oh, you probably could have got him in like round 4, even maybe round 5. Why are you reaching at 24?" I think we're at a point in the draft where like a mid round 3 pick and a mid round 4 pick or a mid round 5 pick, like they're the talent between those two are very very minor. That you like, if you like a guy, you take him. You don't wait and see if he's going to be available from your next pick. You take him when you're up, and that's kind of the when you hit the 3rd round. That's kind of where you're at.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Colad or Kool-Aid, or how do you pronounce it, Shane?
I think it's Kolad Amusin.
Colad Amusin, defensive lineman out of University of Windsor, the Lancers, which is going to end Edmonton's time in the draft, or I guess our mock draft, which puts me up with Saskatchewan, Shane,
We have
and
4 picks remaining for anyone
four
who's paying
picks.
attention. 4 picks.
Let's do it justice. Then let's get Saskatchewan on the clock. So Shane, I had some thoughts here of I'm gonna stick in Saskatchewan. Kind of the stereotype is Montreal drafting Montreal guys. I'm gonna go with Saskatchewan drafting Saskatchewan guys, even though I guess this guy is technically not a Saskatchewan guy. But I did have the thought process between Seth Hundeby, University of Saskatchewan linebacker. I'm not gonna actually go with him. I'm gonna go with Delaney Robinson, the defensive back out of Regina, the University of Regina. I think this is a guy that isn't getting enough attention. I think that's probably fair. I think that's kind of due to his lack of position flexibility. I don't believe this is a guy that's going to be able to come in and be versatile outside of playing corner. And I think that limits him to basically playing the field corner because it's a dangerous game in that boundary, playing boundary corner, and I don't know if he's quite ready to step into the professional ranks and do that. So, with not really having any experience and being, I don't think, ready to play at safety, hurts him. I don't know his ability to play special teams. He wasn't the most used at the University of Regina, but I think as a pure athlete, we saw him. He blew up at the East West Bowl last year in 2024 testing with his 40 time. And then at the combine, it was a little bit of a not underwhelming because he just ran a little bit slower than his time, but he ran, I believe, in the 4.5s, a good time for a corner. Um, and I like him as a prospect. I'm just curious of the lack of position flexibility isn't a great thing when it comes to some of these mid-rounder guys because you're trying to find any way to find a jersey on game day with only having whatever it is 44 game day jerseys and 24 starters. You're kind of limited as how many backups you can carry on an active game day roster. So I'm going to go with Delaney Robinson at number 25. Shane.
Yeah, my thing with him is that he's passive. Like he is definitely a developmental player and someone that you probably keep on your practice squad. Like he won't see the field until year 2. He's a CGFL guy, moving up from the CGFL to U Sports. He seems on tape to be a very focused player. He's player focused. He doesn't really. He's not much of a ball hawk. Like he's not going to be an interception machine. Um, so I don't know if that's what they wanted out of Regina, or if that's just his play style and that's his skill set. That's up for teams to kind of figure out where he is. This is one reason why I wish we could watch the combines because you'd be able to see how he does one on one. But I agree. I think this is a guy that you look at. His can he play other positions? He'll probably start off at safety like most Canadians do, and then maybe move down to the boundary side. But I don't know. I think this is a he has the tools. He's like a very raw prospect. He has the tools. Can Saskatchewan make it work? I don't know, but I like that pick.
All right, so that means Montreal's on the clock for. Oh no, Shane ends the draft. So Shane, you got two, and I
Yes.
got one left, buddy.
Yeah, so I got the Montreal Alouettes on the clock, and I am taking the third quarterback of this draft. Out of University of Montreal, I am taking quarterback Jonathan Senecal. Um, again, I talk about it with everyone. The span of quarterbacks is 3 years usually before they're even considered a starter. Uh, Moss seems to love him. Every time he's talking about quarterbacks and U Sports quarterbacks, he talks about Senecal. I think it just makes too much sense. What is Caleb Williams? I don't know. Where, but McLeod Bethel Thompson is what, 37, 38? Like, is he going to be back next year? I don't know. You have that open spot there. So Evans is coming back from a serious knee injury, and his development hasn't really progressed. Like, he hasn't progressed much as a thrower from when he first entered the league with Ottawa till last year. So, like, that position, that QB2 spot from 26 and beyond is open. Um, so I think Senecal here at 26 makes a lot of sense for Montreal.
I like that pick. Um, I'm very curious. Obviously, all the pub has been, and we've talked about this Shane off camera, maybe even on camera before. Like the conversation starts with the first two quarterbacks, but honestly, it gets even more exciting with the thought of like you and I maybe potentially being live next week, and when possibly Senecal and Desjardins. And I think even if a team falls in love with the idea of Tuchinski as an athlete type, not probably a quarterback, unfortunately, but coming in, being possibly a short yardage weapon, being a guy that can maybe develop as a receiver, kind of that Brad Sinopoli type. I think there is some intrigue there. I just question whether or not he's going to be able to get called on game day and maybe just more of a UDFA type guy in the CFL. But I really do believe that Desjardins and Senecal do get drafted at some point in the draft, and I'm curious to see where they land and hope that they get, they go to a situation that's good for them, that actually nurtures them and actually wants to develop them long term, isn't just brought in to, you know, do they have it year one and then it's kind of give up on them? No,
No,
these are project guys that need 2 3 years to develop into a pro style, pro lifestyle, if that's what you want to call it, and actually give them the opportunity to flourish in your system. So I'm curious to see what happens with those two guys and where they could be, because I think their floor is pretty high entering, but I curious what their ceiling could be with some of their development that could be in the pros.
yeah, I mean he's not projected to get drafted, but Keegan Hall, the former McMaster quarterback who transferred over to York, in terms of play style ability and like arm strength, in my opinion, from what I've seen, and again, I don't have access to hours and hours on film. I can only watch the games and see what the games show. Um, Keegan Hall, if he was a little bit bigger, because I think he's only like 5'11, like he's like 5'11", 6 feet. I think if he was a little bit bigger, a little bit taller, he probably is in that conversation with like Senecal and Desjardins.
Mm.
Like he has really good arm strength. His throwing mechanics look really smooth. Um, he's probably not going to get drafted this year. It's why he's going to York. But you're looking at a team, maybe in round 6, round 7. If like realistically, if I'm Saskatchewan, I look at there and I'm like, huh, if I'm going to waste a pick, because I think the idea of like wasting a pick is that every pick can be a wasted pick, right? Like in any draft, any league, there are teams in the NHL that go a couple of years without any player from one draft class playing a single game with them, right? Like it is what it is. Um, if I'm Saskatchewan and I'm in the 7th round or late 6th round, I would take Keegan Hall. I think he's an underrated prospect. But who do you have here going uh, at 27?
Okay, so this is my last pick of the draft with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and I have two positions or two, I guess, prospects that I'm deciding over right now, Shane. And one of them is definitely a sleeper pick and will be included in my sleepers when that releases, Shane. I'm actually going to send you, check this guy out, man. A very, very underrated back. I actually went back and watched a few of the Western games from this past season. Keanu Yazbek. And I will go and say that I believe he is RB1 of this draft class. Got a lot, I wouldn't say a little bit, a lot outshined by being in the backfield with Keon Edwards, former OUA All Star, was, you know, on pace to be a professional running back or be in conversations to be after that 2022 like breakout season onto the scene. Has dealt with some injuries, and in that Western offense, they're more of a community type backfield. So Yazbek has been a big committee back, and unfortunately hasn't been able to get as much shine as I think he would in a UBC backfield, a Manitoba Bison's backfield, where we're talking about Isaiah Knight and Braden Stubbs. Rightfully so; those guys are both talented backs. But Keanu Yazbek throughout his career, I believe, is like 8.9 yards per carry. Can kind of do it all, catch the ball out of the backfield as well. Runs hard, a very slasher between the tackles. Can cut on a dime, a very underrated back, I think. And like I said, I will say now, if it's a hot take, I think Keanu Yazbek is RB1 out of this class. I would love to go here and try to, create that Johnny Augustine effect that they did for the last few years with Andrew Harris being number one in there, and then Augustine kind of being that number two. When Brady came in, Augustine was at number two, and Yazbek, I think, could be that number two. I just don't think this is kind of maybe territory. Definitely um, definitely kind of curious to see where he ends up going, because I think it needs to be a right fit, like a Winnipeg, not just somebody that kind of wants to take a player more so than actually want to bring him in and have a plan for him. I'm going to go with Max von Mueldorfer, defensive lineman, another guy that I'm very high on. I think is a Mike O'Shea guy. I think we saw them take Kyle Sampson last year, defensive tackle out of UBC, a guy that is kind of a very similar 6'2", 290-ish pounds guy, a guy that is a lunch pail, hard hat kind of guy. Is going to come in, not going to have any gaudy stats or not going to have many stats at all, but is going to be a very disruptive player when it comes to taking on double teams, being able to shed blocks and get tackles in the backfield when it comes to going against the other team's run games. I think this is a very good prospect and a very good he has some potential to be a good pro for a decent amount of years, I think, in the CFL. So I'm gonna go with Max von Mildorfer here at 27, I believe, Shane, and then pass it over to you for our last pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Hamilton on the clock, I think there's really only one position to go. I'm kind of shocked he's still here, but out of Saskatchewan, I'm going Seth Hundaby, linebacker, to finish off the third round. Fills that kind of special teams gap um, that they need. Um, so, yeah, I mean, not much really to say. He's going to be a special teamer. He's probably going to be your third wheel linebacker, maybe fourth wheel linebacker. Um, but could turn into a quality, probably middle linebacker too. I don't see him really being a starter in the CFL, but he's going to be a special teams depth linebacker that can probably get starting reps. But if you're looking at someone who can fill in like a Cameron Judge or someone like that, I don't see that happening with him. But he's going to be a guy kind of like an Adam Claire who can be a starter, but isn't a long term starter.
Yeah, and he's an absolute freak. He obviously tested very well at the combine, but he's 6'2", 250 pounds, moving around very, very quickly. You'll catch some defensive linemen weighing in at 250 pounds and in the CFL. So at that weight, with that athleticism, I think he has a chance to come in and really impress with some teams. And he'd been a guy that had been on my radar a bit with watching some Canada West football over the last few years, but not a guy that I thought would be well, number one, his athleticism never kind of flew off the screen like that. Number one, and then a guy that I thought would kind of be a very good university player, but nothing more than that. And he's obviously proven me wrong to a certain extent so far until he proves himself in the professional ranks. But Shane, that is going to end, buddy, our 3-round mock draft. What are we going to call it? I guess 2.0 is We'll go
Yeah,
with something like that.
2.0.
How are we feeling, Shane? Now that we're looking back at it, obviously hindsight's 2020, I believe is the saying, and maybe we would like to see a guy go here instead of there. But how are we feeling now that mock draft 2.0 is finished?
Honestly, feeling good. I think probably a good 3 rounds. Hopefully, a lot of people agree with who we selected and where we selected them. I think people need to realize that like this this draft doesn't have a lot of top end talent compared to some previous years, but the middle chunk of the draft is a lot stronger than we've seen in recent years, in my opinion. I think this is a draft class that we can look back on in 5 6 years and be like, wow, there was some quality players that have come out from rounds like 3 through 5 um, that may not be starters, but will definitely be impact players um, in like 2028, 2029. So don't be surprised if some of these players are not playing for teams they drafted them by then. But these guys, like, there is some very there's some quality talent here that I wish we had more exposure to.
Yeah, so well said at the end there. Some quality talent that they need more exposure to, get people excited for this upcoming draft. And I'm really excited. And I think doing something like this, Shane, of we were both kind of curious of how things would change compared to our first two mock drafts. And I think this one did quite a bit compared to the other one.
Yeah,
So it's all in Shane and I aren't trying to claim that we are experts by any means. Obviously, trying to be as well educated in some of these prospects and try to give you guys the most legit opinion. But nobody's an expert here. We're all just trying to have good conversation, try to create good conversation for some of these prospects, and especially no draft is a perfect science, right? With some of these, even in real life, right? Of kind of the crapshoot that any draft is of. Um, we see it time and time again. We like to talk about the Aju one with receivers and stuff like that. You see in the NFL with a guy like DK Metcalf who is an athletic freak. He has the measurables, stuff like that. Teams just kind of maybe talk themselves out of it a little bit too much. He falls to, I believe, the second round or whatever it was, pick 50 when he was one of the better prospects from that draft. So
yeah. I
you never
mean,
know what can happen, and it's
draft's
never
a
perfect.
crapshoot. Even the guys who do this for a living get it wrong sometimes, right? Like there's will and skill. Sometimes the player has a lot of skill but doesn't have enough will. Some players have not enough skill and a lot of will to offset that skill, right? So like we're not perfect. You're not going to be perfect. This is to create discussion to figure out where we think people are going to land, where we think people fit best. And there's probably guys that you're going to look at and be like, oh man, they missed A, B, and C. Guess what? There's probably going to be 8 teams that miss A, B, and C as well. And they're looking back in a couple of years being like, man, should have drafted them. But guess what? We can go ahead and sign them. Like, I don't know. I've had fun. I'm excited to see if we get like how many we get right. If we get any right, I think this draft is going to be a lot of fun to watch. And hopefully you guys join us on X because we'll be tweeting about it. Join us, enjoying. So I think the first 2 rounds are going to be on TSN and the rest of it's on like TSN Plus. So like, hopefully it's a fun Tuesday night.
Yes, and I think things, Shane, too, things I remember is situations are situational, man. It's obviously they could have the skill and the will, but maybe you're kind of drafted by a franchise that maybe doesn't want to fully develop you or maybe fully buy in and kind of invest to maybe the player that you could potentially be. So I think falling to the right team is something that is super important as well when talking about these prospects. These are all great players in the grand scheme of things. They're in conversation to be a professional athlete. So not trying to knock any of these guys and not trying to say anyone's shitty. I hate when people say like shitty and crappy and stuff like that when they're talking about professional athletes. Obviously, we can be critical, but these guys would go to the local park and be the best players on the field. So Shane, to close things out, buddy, we actually did bang on for time, buddy. So that was
Yeah,
perfect. Before we get out of here, though, of course, like, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Shane's channel as well, 13th Man Football. Shane's been putting out a ton of good stuff. Shane, I guess that's actually I can send it over to you, buddy.
yeah.
Let the people know where they can find you and what you got going on.
Yeah, so 13th Man Football. starting up again. Where season's right around the corner. Unfortunately, the Red Blacks are doing their training camp in Kingston, so won't be able to do much there. But once the season's going, we'll have we have our weekly show. We're gonna hopefully have some more Red Blacks and CFL focused content, among other things going on. Make sure you follow us on TikTok and Instagram because we're posting more reels and videos as the season goes along. And obviously, I'm here with Cole whenever he hollers or anyone else because I love the CFL. Love talking about it. So yeah, make sure you subscribe, like, swing us a follow at 13th Man Football, or myself at Shane underscore 13th Man on X/Twitter, whatever you want to call it, as long as it's still around. But yeah, this was a lot of fun, and I can't wait for Tuesday.
Yeah, buddy. Make sure you guys go follow the 13th Man Football Instagram account. Shane's been doing a good job with all the graphics and stuff he's been posting lately over there and stuff. Appreciate all the collabs, my guy, as well. Shane, though, man, I think the next time we will chat, maybe we'll chat throughout the week, but the next time I will hopefully see you is for, I guess, announcement. We will be doing a draft show. It's going to be TBD as far as whether or not Shane will be able to join us, but I will be here with some guests throughout the evening. We're going to be doing a live from the end of the second round throughout the rest of the draft, hoping to maybe potentially have some draftees as well as some special guests throughout the evening. So I know Shane's a little bit TBD right now. He's trying to get down to cover the draft night, the event. So Shane will be TBD, but stay tuned for that, guys. That'll be next Tuesday night, April 29th, here on the Canadian Football Fanatics YouTube and Instagram account. But other than that, guys, that is it for Mock Draft 2.0. Make sure you guys are subscribed and following to both Canadian Football Fanatics on Instagram, Twitter, all social media accounts, as well as 13th Man Football. And we will catch you guys on the next one.
See you guys.